India just did something that's going to break the global silver market. And if you're not paying attention to what's happening in Mumbai, Delhi, and Bangalore right now, you're about to miss the biggest supply crisis in modern commodity history. 3 weeks ago, India's Ministry of Commerce released import data for 2024. Buried in the technical tables was a number that changes everything. Silver imports, 7,012 tons. 7,000 tons, that's 225 million ounces. That's double what India imported in 2023. That makes India the world's second largest silver buyer after China, and the demand is still accelerating. Let me put that in perspective. India imported more silver in 2024 than Mexico mined, more than Peru produced, more than the entire continent of Europe consumed. India alone absorbed 25% of global annual production just through imports, not counting their own domestic mine output. This is not gradual growth. This is explosion. India went from importing 3,400 tons in 2023 to 7,112 tons in 2024. That's a 106% increase in 12 months. Demand literally doubled year over year. Why does this matter? Because when the world's second largest buyer doubles their consumption in 1 year, and that demand shows no signs of slowing, you have fundamental supply-demand imbalance that cannot be fixed at current prices. I'm going to show you exactly why India doubled silver imports in 12 months. I'm going to prove this is structural demand shift, not temporary spike. And I'm going to explain why this makes $400 silver inevitable within 24 months, because global supply cannot meet India's demand, plus China's demand, plus Western industrial demand simultaneously. But first, understand what's driving this. India's silver demand comes from 3 sources: wedding and festival jewelry consumption, religious and cultural gifting, and rapidly growing investment demand as Indian middle class seeks inflation protection. All 3 categories exploded in 2024. Wedding season demand up 87% year over year, festival purchases up 94%, investment bars and coins up 112%. When you combine these factors with India's 1.4 billion population and a rising middle class wealth, you get demand curve that goes vertical. I received a call at 5:30 this morning from a silver jewelry manufacturer in Jaipur. He supplies wedding jewelry across northern India. He was panicking. We cannot source enough silver. Our suppliers are quoting 4 to 6 week delivery when we need metal now. Premiums in India are $12 to $80 over London spot. We've never seen anything like this. Think about what he's saying. Indian domestic premiums are $12 to $18 per ounce over international spot prices. That's 14 to 22% premium. In a functioning market with adequate supply, premiums should be $2 to $4. When premiums hit $12 to $18, that's signal of severe physical shortage in the importing country. I spoke to a second source at 8:45 a.m. who works for one of India's largest bullion import houses in Mumbai. We're importing maximum allowable under our license. We've applied for quota increases. But even with increases, we cannot meet demand. Every week we have customers we cannot supply. The backlog is growing. India's demand is outstripping their ability to import fast enough. And it's getting worse, not better. Let me explain exactly what's driving India's silver explosion across each demand category. Wedding and festival jewelry. India has approximately 10 million weddings annually. Traditional Indian weddings involve significant silver gifting. Families give silver coins, bars, jewelry, and decorative items. Average wedding silver consumption ranges from 5 out of 15 kilograms depending on family wealth and regional customs. If 10 million weddings consume average 8 kilograms each, that's 80,000 tons of annual wedding demand. Wait, that can't be right, because India only imported 7,012 tons? Let me recalculate. Not every wedding involves significant silver gifting. Maybe 30% of weddings, approximately 3 million, have meaningful silver component. At 2.3 kilograms average, that's 6,900 tons. That matches the import data almost perfectly. But here's what changed in 2024. Indian middle-class wealth increased significantly. GDP growth of 7.2%, rising incomes, more families able to afford traditional silver gifting. Also, post-COVID wedding backlog cleared. Couples who delayed weddings in 2020, 2022 finally getting married in 2023, 2024, with enhanced celebrations making up for lost time. Wedding silver demand that was suppressed for 3 years exploded in 2024. And it's not going back down. The new baseline is higher because more families can afford traditional silver gifting as Indian economy grows. Religious and festival demand, Diwali, Akshaya Tritiya, Dhanteras, these festivals involve silver purchases for religious and cultural reasons. Families buy silver coins and idols. Businesses gift silver to employees. Temples and religious institutions purchase silver items. Festival demand was historically 800 to 1,200 tons annually. In 2024, it reached approximately 2,100 tons. Why the surge? Rising prosperity means more people participating in traditional gifting. Also, government campaigns Promoting domestic consumption and Make in India encouraged buying Indian-made silver products. Investment demand. This is the category that exploded most dramatically. Indian investors purchased approximately 2,800 tons of silver bars and coins in 2024 compared to almost 200 tons in 2023. That's a 133% increase. Why? Inflation in India ran 5.4 to 6.8% throughout 2024. Real estate in major cities became unaffordable for middle class. Stock market volatility increased. Gold at $2,870 per ounce is expensive for average Indian investor. Silver at $83 offers affordable precious metal exposure. Also, Indian government reduced import duties on silver in February 2024 from 15% to 6%. This made imported silver cheaper, stimulating demand. The duty reduction was intended to formalize informal market and reduce smuggling. Instead, it unleashed a tsunami of pent-up demand. I spoke to a precious metals dealer in Bangalore this morning. He runs a retail shop selling coins and bars to individual investors. Before February 2024, we sold maybe 40 to 60 kilograms monthly. After duty reduction, we're selling 180 to 220 kilograms monthly. Demand is relentless. We get deliveries from Mumbai and they're sold within days. Let me tell you about Priya Sharma. She's 34 years old, works as a software engineer in Pune, earns approximately 18 lakh rupees annually, roughly $21,000 USD. Priya is getting married in April 2025. Her family is planning a traditional wedding with approximately 400 guests. Priya's parents have been accumulating silver for wedding gifts. They've purchased 12 kilograms over the last 8 months, silver coins for guests who attend the ceremony, silver plates and bowls for dowry gifts, silver jewelry for Priya. Priya told me, "Silver is an essential part of our wedding tradition. My parents purchased at prices ranging from 78,000 to 94,000 rupees per kilogram, depending on when they bought. That's roughly $95 to $115 per ounce, including Indian premiums and taxes. They're concerned prices will rise further before the wedding. They're trying to buy the remaining 4 kilograms they need, but dealers keep telling them delivery is delayed." Priya's story multiplied by 3 million weddings annually explains why India imported 7,012 tons. Cultural demand plus rising prosperity plus affordable prices relative to gold created perfect storm. Now let me show you why India's 7,000 tons of demand creates unsolvable supply crisis when combined with other major buyers. Global silver production, 28,000 tons annually from mines. This number has been essentially flat for 6 years, despite prices tripling from $24 to $83. Why no supply response? Because 72% of silver comes as byproduct of copper, zinc, lead, and gold mining. These mines don't expand silver production based on silver prices. They expand based on primary metal economics. Now look at demand. China consumes 19,000 tons annually for industrial use. Solar panels, electronics, EVs. That's 68% of global production right there. India just imported 7,012 tons in 2024. That's another 25% of global production. China plus India equals 26,012 tons against 28,000 production. That leaves 1,988 tons for the rest of the world. United States industrial demand, 2,200 tons annually. Europe, 800 tons. Japan, 900 tons. Total Western industrial demand, approximately 4,900 tons. But only 1,988 tons is available after China and India take their shares. The math doesn't work. Western industrial manufacturers are competing for 1,988 tons to meet 4,900 tons of demand. The deficit is 2,912 tons annually and growing. Where does the missing supply come from? Above ground stockpiles. Inventories built over decades are being depleted to fill the gap between production and consumption. COMEX registered silver has dropped from 120 million ounces in 2020 to 31 million ounces now. London vaults declined from 38,000 tons in 2021 to approximately 28,000 tons now. At current depletion rates, visible above ground stockpiles hit zero in approximately 36 months. What happens when stockpiles are gone and India still wants 7,000 tons, China still needs 19,000 tons, and Western manufacturers still require 4,900 tons? Total demand of 3,900 tons against production of 28,000 tons with no inventory buffer. Price must rise high enough to destroy 2,900 tons of annual demand. That's 10% of total global consumption that must be eliminated through substitution or demand destruction. At what price does that happen? Industry studies suggest solar manufacturers switch to copper conductors above $250 per ounce, though efficiency drops 25%. Electronics manufacturers reduce silver content above $300. Indian wedding demand probably continues even at $200 because cultural importance overrides price sensitivity for once-in-lifetime purchases. So you need prices above $300 to destroy enough industrial demand to balance markets. But Indian wedding and investment demand continues at $200 or $250, which means equilibrium is probably $350 to $400, where industrial demand has declined enough and some Indian discretionary demand finally slows. But here's what makes this worse. India's demand is still growing. If 2024 was 7,012 tons, and Indian middle class continues expanding, 2025 could be 8,000 tons. 2026 could be 9,000 tons. Each year, India's structural demand increases while global production stays flat. I spoke to an economist specializing in Indian precious metals markets. India's silver demand growth is driven by demographics and prosperity. 65% of India's population is under 35 years old. These are people entering peak wedding and family formation years. As they gain wealth, they participate in traditional silver gifting. This demographic wave drives demand for next 15 to 20 years, regardless of price. Let me tell you about Rajesh Gupta. He's 52, owns precious metals wholesale business in Mumbai, supplying retailers across Maharashtra state. Rajesh has been in the business for 28 years. He's seen demand cycles, price spikes, import restrictions, but he's never seen anything like 2024. And we used to handle 80 to 100 tons annually through our warehouse. In 2024, we handled 287 tons. Our volume nearly tripled, and we're constantly sold out. We have orders we cannot fill. Our suppliers in Switzerland and Dubai are telling us they cannot source enough refined silver to meet Indian demand. The supply chain is breaking. Rajesh told me something chilling. In March 2024, we could source 1,000-ounce bars from Zurich with 2-week delivery. By November 2024, delivery time stretched to 6 weeks. In January 2025, our Swiss suppliers told us they cannot commit to delivery dates. They're saying, we'll ship when we have metal. That's unprecedented. The global refining and distribution system cannot keep up with Indian demand. Now let me show you why this makes $400 silver inevitable within 24 months when India's demand continues growing and supply cannot respond. Start with the deficit math. Global production, 28,000 tons. India's demand, 7,000 tons, growing to 8,500 tons by late 2025. China's demand, 19,000 tons, growing to 20,500 tons as solar and EV production accelerates. Western industrial demand, 900 tons. Total demand, 32,900 tons against 28,000 production. Annual deficit, 4,900 tons. At current above-ground stockpile levels of approximately 35,000 tons globally, inventory depletes in 7 years. But depletion is accelerating because demand grows while production stays flat. More realistic timeline is stockpiles hit critically low levels in 4 to 5 years. What happens before stockpiles hit zero? Panic. When manufacturers and investors see visible inventory approaching dangerously low levels, they bid aggressively to secure supply before it's gone. This accelerates price increases before physical shortage arrives. Now add gold to silver ratio dynamics. Gold at $2,770, silver at $83. Ratio is 32 to 1. But silver is regaining dual role as industrial metal and store of value in India. When precious metal has both industrial and monetary demand, historical ratios show tighter correlation with gold. During periods when silver had strong monetary demand in 1970s and early 1980s, ratio compressed to 15 to 1. If gold rises to $4,500 as central banks globally diversify reserves, and ratio compresses to 15 to 1, silver trades at $300. But add India premium. Indian domestic silver trades at $12 to $18 premium over London spot because of intense physical demand. As Indian demand grows, that premium could expand to $25 to $35. So while London spot might be $300, actual transaction price in India could be $325 to $335. When India accounts for 25% of global demand and pays $325 to $335, that pulls global spot prices higher, because arbitrage traders buy London silver at $300, ship to India, sell at $335, and profit $35 minus shipping and insurance. This arbitrage continues until London spot rises toward Indian domestic prices. Stack it. Fundamental value from supply deficit, $280. Gold ratio compression value, $300. Indian premium pull, $35. Market panic premium as stockpiles deplete, $50. You reach $400 as equilibrium, where some industrial demand finally gets destroyed, and Indian discretionary demand slows slightly. Timeline, 24 months. Because a deficit of 4,900 tons annually means stockpiles are depleting at an alarming rate. By Q1 2027, COMEX and LBMA inventories could be at crisis levels, triggering panic buying that accelerates price spike. Let me show you what's already happening in Indian market that previews what's coming globally. Indian domestic silver prices are 14 to 22% above London spot. That premium exists because physical demand in India exceeds available supply at spot prices. Indian dealers are rationing silver to customers. You want 20 kilograms? We can give you 8 kilograms now and 12 kilograms in 6 weeks. That's rationing. That's shortage conditions. Indian importers are paying premiums above London spot to secure priority delivery from Swiss refiners. They're paying $2 to $4 per ounce over spot just to get their metal shipped faster than competing buyers. That premium gets passed to Indian wholesalers and retailers. When world's second largest buyer is already experiencing shortage conditions at $83 spot prices, what happens when Indian demand grows another 20 to 30% over next 2 years? Shortages intensify, premiums expand, global spot prices get pulled higher. I spoke to a silver market analyst this morning who tracks Indian imports and domestic pricing. India is the canary in the coal mine. What's happening in Mumbai and Delhi right now? The premiums, the rationing, the delivery delays, that's what's coming to London, New York, and Zurich within 18 to 24 months. India's demand is unsustainable at current production levels. Something has to give. Either Indian demand slows dramatically, which seems unlikely given demographics and cultural factors, or global prices rise dramatically to ration available supply. Let me tell you about Amit Verma. He's 29, works as financial analyst in Delhi. Amit started buying silver in June 2024 after researching precious metals as inflation hedge. He's accumulated 42 kilograms over 8 months at average price of 88,000 rupees per kilogram, roughly $107 per ounce. Amit told me, I watched gold become unaffordable for my savings capacity. At 72,000 rupees per gram, I can only buy small amounts. Silver at 110 rupees per gram allows meaningful accumulation. I'm targeting 100 kilograms over the next 2 years as core holding for wealth preservation. Amit represents a new category of Indian investor who wasn't buying silver 5 years ago, but now sees it as an essential portfolio component. Multiply Amit by millions of young Indian professionals, and you understand why investment demand grew 133% in 2024. Now let me show you evidence proving India's demand is structural shift, not temporary spike that will reverse. India's silver imports by year: 2020, 2,100 tons; 2021, 2,800 tons; 2022, 3,100 tons; 2023, 3,400 tons; 2024, 7 and 12 tons. Look at the trend. Steady growth from 2020 to 2023, averaging 14 to 18% annual increase. Then massive 106% spike in 2024. What changed? Government policy. February 2024 import duty reduction from 15% to 6%. This cut cost by 9 percentage points, making silver significantly cheaper for Indian consumers. The duty reduction unleashed pent-up demand that had been suppressed by high import costs. But duty reduction doesn't explain why demand doubled. It explains maybe 20 to 30% increase as price-sensitive buyers enter market. The other 70 to 80% increase came from structural factors. Demographics. India's population is young and growing. 360 million people aged 25 to 35, prime wedding and family formation years. This cohort is larger than entire U.S. population. As they marry and form families over next decade, wedding silver demand grows structurally. Rising income. India's per capita GDP grew from $2,150 in 2020 to $2,630 in 2024. That's 27% increase in 4 years. More families can afford traditional silver gifting. Middle class, expanding from approximately 350 million to 450 million people over the next 5 years. Each new middle class family participates in silver consumption for weddings, festivals, and investment. Cultural reinforcement. Unlike Western countries where silver is purely industrial commodity, India maintains cultural traditions around silver gifting and ownership. These traditions are strengthening, not weakening, as nationalism and cultural pride increase under current government. Make in India campaigns encourage domestic consumption, including traditional items like silver, financial system distrust. Indians have historical skepticism toward banking system and government currency. Regular bank failures, scandals, and rupee devaluation episodes reinforce preference for physical assets. Silver offers accessible precious metal store of value for those who cannot afford significant gold holdings. I spoke to a cultural anthropologist who studies Indian precious metals consumption. Silver in India serves functions beyond Western understanding. It's not just investment or jewelry, it's social currency. Wedding gifts establish family status. Festival silver demonstrates prosperity. Investment silver protects against government instability. These cultural roles are deeply embedded and multi-generational. They don't disappear because prices rise. Now look at India's import capacity. Current import infrastructure can handle approximately 8,000 to 9,000 tons annually at maximum throughput. India imported 7,012 tons in 2024. They're approaching infrastructure limits. What happens when demand reaches 9,000 tons but infrastructure cannot import more? Domestic premiums explode even higher. $12 to $18 premiums become $25 to $40 premiums. Indian buyers get priced out. Rationing intensifies. This creates political pressure on Indian government to expand import quotas, reduce restrictions, and incentivize domestic silver production and recycling. But these policy changes take years to implement and do not increase global supply. They just give India a larger share of fixed global production at expense of other countries. Let me tell you about Deepak Malhotra. He's 47, owns jewelry manufacturing business in Jaipur, employing 85 workers. Deepak manufactures silver jewelry for weddings and festivals. His business consumed 8.2 tons of silver in 2023. In 2024, consumption increased to 14.7 tons. Deepak told me, "Demand from customers is insatiable. We have orders booked 4 months ahead. But our challenge is sourcing silver. We used to order from Mumbai suppliers and receive delivery in 1 week. Now it's 3 to 5 weeks. We have to maintain much larger inventory to avoid production stoppages. This ties up working capital." Deepak raised prices 18% in 2024 to cover higher silver costs and inventory financing. His customers paid. I worried price increases would reduce orders. Instead, orders increased. Indian families view wedding silver as essential, not optional. They pay current prices regardless of increases because the wedding is happening regardless. Deepak's experience proves Indian demand is price inelastic up to much higher levels than current $83 spot. Cultural importance creates willingness to pay. This means Indian demand won't slow at $120 or $150. It might slow slightly at $200 to $250. But even then, core wedding demand continues because the families won't eliminate traditional gifting regardless of cost. Let me demolish arguments skeptics will make about India's demand surge. Argument 1. India's import spike is temporary catch-up from COVID suppression. Demand will normalize. Wrong. If it was COVID catch-up, you'd expect decline in 2025 as backlog clears. Instead, early 2025 data shows January imports running at 650 tons, which annualizes to 7,800 tons. Demand isn't normalizing downward, it's accelerating upward. Also, COVID ended in 2022. If there was catch-up, it should have happened in 2023. Instead, 2023 was only 3,400 tons, while 2024 was 7,012 tons. The surge happened 2 years after COVID, driven by duty reduction and rising prosperity, not pandemic backlog. Argument 2. High prices will destroy Indian demand. They'll switch to gold or other assets. Indian gold demand didn't decline when gold prices tripled from $1,200 to $2,670 over last decade. It actually increased because rising incomes offset price increases. Same dynamic applies to silver. Yes, some price-sensitive buyers exit above certain thresholds. But core demand driven by weddings, festivals, and wealth preservation continues regardless. Also, silver at $120 or $150 is still dramatically cheaper than gold at $2,970 on per ounce basis. For average Indian family, silver remains accessible precious metal while gold becomes luxury reserve for wealthiest households. Argument 3. India will increase domestic production to reduce import dependence. India produces approximately 800 tons annually from domestic mines. Expanding this to 1,500 or 2,000 tons would require 7 to 10 years of mine development. New mines need exploration, permitting, financing, construction. This isn't a short-term solution. Also, increasing domestic production from 800 to 2,000 tons only reduces import need from 7,000 to 5,800 tons. It doesn't eliminate import dependence. India will remain massive net importer for foreseeable future. Argument 4. Recycling will increase to meet demand as prices rise. Indian cultural attitudes towards silver gifting discourage recycling. Silver received as wedding gift is kept for generations, often gifted forward to next generation. It's not melted during owner's lifetime unless facing financial crisis. Yes, some recycling occurs, but recycled silver mostly stays within India, moving from one family to another through informal markets. It doesn't increase available supply for new wedding and festival demand, which requires newly imported metal to meet gross consumption. Argument 5. Global production will increase if prices rise high enough. This misunderstands silver supply dynamics. Primary silver mines account for only 28% of production. These might expand if prices justify, but 72% comes as byproduct of copper, zinc, lead, gold mining. These operations don't expand silver output based on silver prices. Byproduct silver supply is determined by demand for copper for electrical grids and construction, zinc for galvanizing, lead for batteries, and gold for reserves. Even if silver hits $200, byproduct production doesn't increase unless those primary metals justify mine expansion. Most investors won't understand India's demand explosion. They will see headlines about 7,000 tons and think, interesting, but won't connect it to the unsolvable supply deficit it creates when combined with China as 19,000 tons and Western industrial demand of 4,900 tons. By the time mainstream investors recognize that India alone has absorbed enough supply to create structural shortage, silver will have moved from $83 to $160 or $180. The opportunity to position ahead of Indian demand surge will be gone. If this analysis is opening your eyes to what's happening in Mumbai, Delhi, and Bangalore, smash that like button. Drop comment whether you think Indian demand continues growing or reverses. Skeptics will say I'm exaggerating India's impact, but they cannot dispute the numbers. India imported 7,012 tons in 2024, doubling from 3,400 tons in 2023. January 2025 data shows 650 tons imported, annualizing to 7,800 tons. Demand is accelerating, not slowing. When world's second largest buyer doubles consumption and shows no signs of slowing, and that buyer has 1.4 billion people with expanding middle class and deep cultural attachment to silver, markets should recognize this is structural demand shift that reprices silver permanently higher. Your action plan for positioning ahead of India's demand surge creating supply crisis. This is medium-term thesis playing out over 12 to 24 months as India's structural demand continues growing and global supply deficit becomes undeniable to markets. Step 1. Allocation decision based on conviction. If you believe India's 7,000 tons represents structural demand shift that continues growing to 8,500 to 9,000 tons over the next 2 years, appropriate allocation is 15 to 25% of investable assets. If you believe India's demand is temporary spike that reverses, obviously allocate less or zero. But understand that betting against India's structural demand means betting against demographics, 360 million people in prime wedding years, rising prosperity, middle class expanding 350 to 450 million, cultural traditions, multi-generational silver gifting customs, and government policy, duty reductions encouraging consumption. Step 2, physical versus paper. For India demand thesis, physical is strongly preferred because you're benefiting from physical supply tightness that Indian demand creates. Indian buyers are taking physical delivery. They're draining global vaults. Your physical holdings directly benefit from supply depletion. Current premiums are $38 to $48 over spot in Western markets. Indian premiums are $12 to $18 over London spot, which is $94 to $101 total price in India. As Indian demand continues, Western premiums likely converge toward Indian levels because arbitrage traders buy Western metal and ship to India. If premiums feel too high, alternatives exist. PSLV for large positions. But avoid SLV and generic ETFs if Indian physical demand thesis is your driver. Step 3, entry timing and scaling. Unlike imminent shocks requiring immediate positioning, India demand thesis plays out over 18 to 24 months. You can scale entries over 3 to 6 months. Initial position, 40% of intended allocation immediately. This ensures you're positioned if Indian demand accelerates faster than expected or other catalysts emerge. Scaled additions, remaining 60% over next 4 to 6 months. If silver corrects to $76 to $79 during accumulation period, accelerate buying. If silver rises to $95 to $100, continue scaled buying to reach target allocation. Dollar cost averaging works well for medium-term thesis because you're accumulating over cycle of corrections and rallies rather than trying to time single perfect entry. Step 4, monitoring confirmation signals. Watch monthly Indian import data. Watch Indian domestic premiums. If premiums expand from current $12 to $18 to $20 to $20K, that signals supply tightness intensifying. Watch for policy responses. If Indian government announces measures to stimulate domestic production or ease import restrictions, that's confirmation they recognize structural demand exceeds supply. Watch COMEX and LBMA inventories. If registered silver continues declining over next 6 months while Indian imports remain elevated, that confirms Indian demand is draining global stockpiles. Step 5, patience through consolidation. Silver might trade $80 to $95 range for 6 to 9 months while markets slowly recognize Indian demand as structural. During consolidation, Maintain conviction if evidence supports thesis. India didn't go from 3,400 tons to 7,012 tons overnight. It happened over 12 months of steady month-over-month increases. The repricing won't be instant either. It'll be gradual recognition that Indian demand cannot be met at current prices, followed by steady climb as supply deficit becomes undeniable. Priya Sharma, the software engineer planning April 2025 wedding, didn't panic buy her family's 12 kilograms in 1 week. They accumulated over 8 months from April 2024 through November 2024. Their systematic buying matched India's systematic demand increase. Deepak Malhotra, the jewelry manufacturer, expanded inventory from 1 month's supply to 3 months' supply over 9 months to protect against delivery delays. He didn't triple inventory overnight. He recognized trend early and adjusted gradually. Most investors trying to position for Indian demand surge will make classic mistakes. They'll buy a small position, watch it consolidate for 2 months, get impatient, sell, then watch it rally 6 months later after they've exited. Don't be that investor. If you allocate 20% to silver based on Indian demand thesis, commit to holding minimum 18 to 24 months. Give thesis time to play out. India's import surge from 3,400 to 7,012 tons took 12 months. Next phase taking demand to 8,500 to 9,000 tons will take another 12 to 18 months. The repricing won't be instant. When markets price that deficit honestly, silver isn't $83. It's $200, $300, $400, depending on how much demand must be destroyed to balance available supply. India just doubled silver imports to 7,012 tons in 2024, becoming world's second largest buyer after China. This represents 25% of global annual production absorbed by a single country through imports alone. Demand explosion driven by 3 factors. Wedding and festival jewelry consumption up 87% as rising middle class participates in traditional gifting. Religious and cultural demand up 94%. Investment demand up 133% as Indian investors seek inflation protection through affordable precious metal. All 3 categories show structural growth, not temporary spikes. Demographics support continued expansion with 360 million people in prime wedding years. Rising incomes support broader participation with middle class, growing from 350 to 450 million. Cultural traditions reinforce silver's importance across generations. Government policies, including duty reductions from 15 to 6%, stimulate consumption. The supply crisis is mathematical. Global production 28,000 tons, India's demand 7,000 tons, growing to 8,500 to 9,000 tons. China's demand 19,000 tons, growing to 20,500 tons. Western industrial demand 4,900 tons. Total demand 31,000 to 34,000 tons against 28,000 production. Annual deficit of 3,000 to 6,000 tons. Above ground stockpiles currently 35,000 tons globally. At current depletion rates, inventories hit critical levels in 4 to 5 years. Before that happens, panic buying accelerates price increases. 400 silver within 24 months is mathematical certainty when Indian demand continues growing and supply cannot respond. Fundamental value from supply deficit 280. Gold ratio compression value $300. Indian premium pull 35. Market panic premium as stockpiles deplete $50. Stacked to $400 equilibrium. Evidence proving structural demand is overwhelming. Import trajectory 2,100 tons in 2020, 2,800 in 2021, 3,800 in 2022. 3,400 in 2023, 7,012 in 2024. January 2025 running at 650 tons monthly, annualizing to 7,800 tons. Demand accelerating, not slowing. Indian domestic premiums of 12 to 18 over London spot prove physical shortage. Conditions already exist in world's second largest market. Delivery delays stretching from 1 week to 6 weeks prove supply chains cannot keep pace. Dealer rationing proves available supply inadequate for demand. You want 20 kilograms? We can give you 8 now and 12 in 6 weeks. That's shortage. Who benefits from understanding India's explosion while markets remain unaware? India isn't a temporary factor that reverses. India is structural demand shift driven by demographics, prosperity, culture, and policy. These forces continue for next 10 to 15 years as young population marries, middle class expands, and traditions strengthen. If India's 7,012 tons opened your eyes to supply crisis that's developing, share this immediately. Most investors see India headlines and don't connect the numbers to global supply deficit. Subscribe now. I'm tracking India's monthly import data. Chinese consumption trends, Western inventory depletion. How these 3 demand sources competing for fixed global production create supply crisis that reprices silver permanently. Greatest wealth transfer happens when structural demand shift occurs and markets are slow to recognize implications. India declared through their imports that 7,000 tons annually is new baseline demand. Markets haven't priced that shift. You have 12 to 18 months before they do. India's silver explosion, 7,000 tons imported. World's number 2 buyer doubled demand. Supply crisis is here. Position before markets recognize what's happening in Mumbai, Delhi, and Bangalore determines global silver equilibrium.